we've got a report called Buyers Are Not Blank Slates, harkening back to this old idea in psychology that human beings are born as blank slates and experience can make them anything. That old Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd movie, Trading Places, was based on that idea. It's absolutely not the case. So if you go to the next slide, Scott, what we see from the research is that, as I mentioned a minute ago, buyers, and when I say buyers, like all members of the buying group, anybody you ask is going to say that they have prior experience with at least one of the vendors. And most of the time, like 75% of the time, they know all of the vendors. And by no, I don't mean that they've seen your ad. I mean that they say they have prior experience. When we think about what that prior experience is likely to have been, we know that most buying processes that start, and we'll talk about this in a minute, they end, but without buying anything. And then if you're a player that gets 20% of the business in your space or something like that, then most of the buying processes that end up buying something end up buying from somebody else. That's the math, right? So virtually everybody that you'll try to influence for your next deals have been through buying processes before, and they either finished without buying anything or finished buying somebody other than you. So the marketplace that you're marketing to is absolutely full of people who have experienced a buying process with you, but did not buy from you for one reason or another. Like that, we all need to wrap our heads around, like this is the audience that we're marketing to today. So awareness in the straight sense of it, probably not that big of a deal. People aren't going to forget you after having been through a buying process. But are they going to be thinking about you in a way that is helpful for you? What are they going to be thinking about? And the critical thing is here, if you don't make that day one shortlist, if they either didn't like their prior experience or you're a smaller player and not the first one they think about, your chances of winning a deal are extremely low, like less than 15%. So our buyers are different, in a way that we've ever thought of them. This is true of the financial guy, the IT guy, the purchasing people. They all say that they've got this prior experience. That's who we're marketing to. Very different for when we think about what kind of content, what kind of messaging we're going to use. I think it tells us we're going to need a very different approach.
A lot more
So this is
creativity is a way also that I think we can address. It's not just brand awareness is what I'm hearing you're saying. It's making your brand relevant in the conversation and contextualizing it for today's reality. So
That's right.
your effort ends not just about content marketing, but it's about how can I add value? How can I answer questions in a unique and compelling way? And we talk a lot about that as the buyer enablement mindset.
Yep, that's right. And it has to be not just the primary buyer persona. We'll talk about this in just a minute. But we've got to understand that everybody who's going to be involved in that decision process at least thinks that they know us. And that's the audience that we're marketing to. And that's very different from the way that we set up our content and things today, which is mostly how do we educate the market about who we are and what we do. Your audience isn't interested in the 101 class for the most part. They want to skip to the senior level seminar.
I think that's a big takeaway. Victoria, what are you seeing out there?
I think this is a little bit of a doom and gloom moment of this presentation, but that's all right because we're gonna come out of it on the other end. And the moment is this: yes, there. Not only do you have sort of a minuscule, maybe I don't know if that's the word that you want to use, Carrie, chance of winning the deal. It's pretty small, right? If the majority of deals end up as either a no deal or they go with a competitor. But you also need to talk and convince a lot of people along the way. And each of these lines represents sort of hordes of people. There's more than one IT professional. There's going to be more than one executive. There's a whole host of business people and security professionals and others, procurement, finance, that are not represented on this chart, but are in the buying group. And so when we think about the buying cycle, it sort of goes in sort of waves like this, and people come in and out of that buying cycle, and different people come in at different times. And we can geek out on who comes in when, and that's a whole other separate webcast, I think. But the point is, you have to talk to so many people along the way to try to win that deal. And these are the people that likely have already experienced you before, or at least have an understanding of who you are and what you do. To Carrie's point, there's going to be a lot more on that in the coming few slides.
Yeah.
Or they brought you into the equation, so they're going to champion you. There might be someone down there, and that's what you're trying to find as well. So it's not all doom and gloom. You want to get into the conversation, and you have to win over and get someone on that buying group.
Part of why that's not all doom and gloom is that decision phase happens largely before those members of the buying group talk to your sellers.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
if you're a marketer, that ain't doom and gloom. That is job security, but we have to understand it. We have to be able to take the research and understand and make that case.
Make the case.
Yeah. So now we're looking at my favorite thing. Right. This is the thing I think people in the last 7 or 8 years have really wrapped their heads around quite a bit in terms of understanding what the buyer looks like. It hasn't yet penetrated into the way that we identify, recognize, and measure buyers, unfortunately. But here's the truth. Your buyer is a big group of people. So for the buying group sizes and the buying cycle lengths you're seeing here, the average deal size would be about 200 to 250K. And, while there are differences, so, APAC buying groups are bigger. And, the difference between EMEA and North America right now really comes down to the fact that in the Netherlands, I just got back from Amsterdam, and in the Netherlands, they only have 7-person buying groups. They are very, very efficient over there. But the rest of Europe is up right where North America is. So big buying groups and then buying cycles. So a really interesting conversation. I was doing a presentation at an event, and I put something like this on the screen and said the average buying cycle across the globe is about a year. It's about 12 months. A couple presentations later, somebody from a sales engagement platform that has really good first-party data about how long sales cycles are said the average sales cycle is about 100 days now. And that matches exactly what we found when we asked buyers. So if your buying cycle is 12 months, what part of that 12 months did you start engaging with sellers? And they said 2/3 of the way through. Well,
Exactly.
100 days is 1/3 of the year, right? So so when you look at that buying cycle, that you have to understand that is not the sales cycle. The sales cycle is a little bit on the end of this.
Yeah, just a cut of it.
Yeah, it's just 1/3 of this buying cycle. It happens on the end, largely after buyers have decided which vendor they like to buy from. Now, they don't buy from that vendor 100% of the time, but they buy from that vendor 80% of the time. You got to win that deal before you talk to them.
And
Exactly.
marketing
It's
has
all
to own the buying cycle. Marketing
100%.
has to own the buying cycle. That's the key thing I'm taking away from this. By the way, these slides are gold if you want to drive that conversation internally across your team, across with other sales executives, et cetera. These are just pure gold, and you'll have a chance to get these slides by participating in this conversation.
And it was so timely coming in from a sales engagement platform, right? Because they're not seeing the dark signals.
That's right.
Those are all happening before the buyers come in and click the button. I want to talk to sales.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So here, this is another one of those revelations that comes partly from our research, partly from research that some other folks have done. So we've known about different buyer personas in B2B for a long time. That is not new information, that there are different kinds of people involved in the buying process. But what we haven't really understood is how important they are, what role they play, and how much harm they can do your buying process. So if you scoot to the next slide, Scott, there's some data from, this is from, we should have put the reference on there, but this is yeah, I think it's, you know what, I think it's actually too low on the slide, but this is a study done by Bain and LinkedIn, and it's called, I think, the real job of marketing is to make it easy for buyers to buy. So what they found is that if you look at deals where or opportunities where buyers go through a buying journey, but then they stop the buying journey without buying anything, that's a lot of the buying journeys, and we've got more data coming out real soon about that. But the number one reason that happens is because the buying group cannot come to consensus about what they should do. So it's not budget, it's not couldn't find the business case. It's that this group of 11 people who enter the buying process with different opinions about what they ought to do cannot come to an agreement about what they do, so they just sit on status quo. And that's killing more of your deals. And by the way, all of these deals you probably don't even know about, right? You never interacted with them. They interacted with you. They came to your website, went to your events or whatever. You didn't have sales conversations with them and they decided not to buy. It's a lot of the scale that we could have.
That's an important point, Carrie. And there's a book dedicated to this called The Jolt Effect, where these numbers play out and they actually dissect based on CRM data over a 3-year period. They actually break down that this number ends in either they stick with the status quo or they couldn't figure out what the right path was. And marketing has a chance to play a role in that, but we may never see it if we're not changing our view, not thinking about the buying cycle, not thinking about what Victoria talked about being buyer led. This is why we're emphasizing these points. These were all stats we know, but we really haven't talked about their ramifications. And that's what we're trying to do today.
Yeah, so this is another look at buying groups. And, so a couple of things to take in. Even on the very low end of cost, buying groups are still large. So even if you sell something that costs 20,000, 30,000 annual value, you're still going to be dealing with a lot of people in an organization. Why? Because for the most part, when you're selling deals those size, you're selling in an organization that is appropriately sized for it. These are all important decisions that these organizations are making about buying something. And when it's an important decision, what we naturally want to do as human beings is spread the risk around, right? So if I'm making a huge decision, it's going to, it's going to impact our company dramatically from a cost standpoint. We're also putting a lot of eggs in the basket of it's going to make us more competitive or better or whatever. It's a big decision, promotions, careers, jobs, and things are on the line. Bonuses are on the line. And if that thing doesn't work out, what we want to be able to say is, yeah, but all 10 of you thought it was a good idea too. And so as the deals get bigger and more important, the buying group does too.
That's our FOMO, fear of messing up, that's really entered the psyche that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, so and if we look at this year over year, what we see again in our research, and it's so complementary between the two organizations, is that really the point of this chart, the colored lines sort of represent 2025, and the gray and the arrows, and is the movement between last year and this year. Really, the point here is that small buying groups are getting smaller, right? They've moved from 39 down to 17.6, and very large buying groups, more than 15 people, are getting larger. They moved from 6.3 to 18.7. And so to harken back to your last slide, Carrie, the way sort of that we like to think about this in the era that we've now entered, the era of efficiency and buying group enablement, let's not think in terms of decision makers anymore. That concept is very quickly becoming outdated. Let's really think about in terms of buying group enablement. Because yes, there might be one single person, maybe it's an IT analyst or an IT executive, who goes to your website and clicks the button and says, let's have a conversation. But that one person represents 10 to 15 to maybe sometimes more other people within the organization that he or she is trying to convince through the buying cycle that you are the vendor they need to go with. So it's really important to think in terms of the buying group. There are really no individual decision makers anymore. And I think to take it even a step further might be controversial for some, and Scott has certainly heard this. Let's start thinking in terms of leads, right? That concept is also outdated, because I think, Carrie, I'm sure you'll plan on talking about this at some point throughout these slides. There's a lot of activity that happens through that buying cycle. I'll just end there. I don't want to steal your thunder. But each of those represents a signal, an engagement, an activity, and merely just that, an activity. that we need to be aware of in order to build the overall picture of the account.